Hi everyone, my name is Francis and my talk with a slightly updated title is on seaweed hybridities in, in gaming the Waterworlds. So I'm going to be looking at the Gothic, the horror and the fantastical in underwater video games. Within this talk, I consider how video games present underwater worlds in which non-human ecologies take center stage. Particularly, I consider how seaweed in these games reach out across contact zones which threaten the normative boundaries of human taxonomy and body. In doing so, these marine tentacles evoke both promises of symbiosis and the objection of human and non-human hybridity. These ocean tentacles offer us, through the slippage between desire and fear, a kind of post-human ecological future. I echo Karen Barad when she argues her use of the term post-human marks a refusal to take the distinction between human and non-human for granted, while signalling the crucial recognition that non-humans play an important role in natural cultural practices. These post-human bodies amid the fantastical undersea invite us to reorientate human bodies within the oceanic space and form alternative relationships to non-humans. For this, I'll be looking at three examples of underwater video games: ABZÜ by Giant Squid, SOMA by Frictional Games, and In Other Waters by Jump Over the Age, in order to consider how seaweeds function in figuring science-fictional and fantastical non-human worlds. The blurrings of boundary lines between human and non-human phenomena facilitate what John Haraway calls becoming with the tentacular, in which anthropocentric discourses of bounded individualism are challenged through co-constitutive ontologies with non-human and cyborgic worlds. For Haraway, thinking through ecologies via science-fictional and symbiotic modes, we can generate multi-species flourishing on Earth. Melissa Bianchi argues that the format of video games themselves enable this non-human becoming with, as game aesthetics and mechanics demand players take specific actions and inhibit distinct roles during play, enabling players not only to think alternative kinships, but to enact making them. 2. Game scholar Alendra Y. Chang argues that ecology of games becomes a vital framework for describing interaction across species, scalar levels, and ontological categories due to these modes of interaction and play. By moving within a video game, you inherently enact practices of contact with non-human bodies and spaces. Here, I take on the non-human figure of seaweed and question their role in figuring alternative ocean kinships and ontological categories in interactive video game media, asking how they function to question the notion of human as a singular or bounded individual. In the game ABZÜ, roughly translating to Ocean of Wisdom in Sumerian, the player swims through multiple oceanic biomes as a scuba diving humanoid who is revealed later to be a technological being. Over the course of the game, you discover remnants of a past civilization whose extractive technologies, known as the Great Harvester, led to vast losses of life in the ocean. ABZÜ ultimately tells the story of the Anthropocene in the ocean, and the fantastical, fictionalized viewpoint of a magical ocean that has already faced mass-extinction events. As you swim through coral reefs, the player enters these fantastical portals in order to bring back lost species. This first portal encounter is in a biome known as the kelp forest. Prior to entering these portals, the surrounding kelp lies dark, with its seaweeds floating, dead and limp in the lifeless pool. As you summon life back from the brink, meters of growing kelp reach out vibrantly from the seafloor. These tall kelps feature heavily in multiple biomes across the game, in vivid greens, pinks, oranges and silvers, contrasting richly against the various blues of the ocean. These become emblematic of the thriving ocean as its ecology is restored. In designing the game, intricate detail went into giving each kelp leaf individual dynamic collision mechanics, with up to 350,000 individual kelp leaves rendered in each environment. In ABZÜ, the environment intimately reacts to the player as you swim among the kelp. As you swim through the vegetation, the complex response of the organism makes it feel alive, with these dynamic contact zones generating a rich agential ocean that reacts to external phenomena. This generates what Stacia Limo calls transcorporeality, in which the human body extends across seawater and into agential other than human bodies. These underwater ocean details, such as the kelp, signify the importance of the environment in video game media, not only for creating aesthetics and interactable spaces, but for generating what is known as environmental storytelling. In the survival horror game SOMA by Frictional Games, you play as Simon, the the implanted memory of a human downloaded into an android scuba suit body, as he explores the haunted underwater facility of Pathos 2 in the year 2104. Life on the planet's surface has been wiped out by a comet, leaving only the planet's underwater ecosystems intact. However, much of the marine life has been mutated by an encroaching man-made bioengineered artificial intelligence known as the WOW. While the setting focus emphasizes the desolation, extinction, and corruption of all planet life, particularly human life, the underwater environment of Pathos 2 are in fact replete with life in the form of its seaweeds. Seaweed in the world of SOMA is a vital tool of environmental storytelling, indicating a world long since hostile to non-vegetal organisms. In game theory, environmental storytelling considers how embedded narratives can emerge through environmental details, such as background props and audio, creating a game space mise-en-scene. While the player will not directly interact with the underwater vegetation, these environmental details of seaweed embed the narrative of long-ago human demise. These seaweed seascapes remind us of the terrifying ability of vegetal life to swallow, engulf, overrun, and outlive humans. Here, these flourishing seaweeds generate an ecophobic fear of nature, of the tentacular green tendrils and blooming algae, growing replete on dilapidated human machinery, become a visual signifier of the displacement of humans. This calls into question the hierarchies of humans over nature. In the darker abyssal space of SOMA, the technological and the vegetal meet. As the seaweeds take over the machines left behind after human extinction, so too does the WOW biomatter spread parasitically on human bodies, creating monsters. The main threat of SOMA comes in the form of these hybrid monsters, transfigured by the WOW artificial intelligence, as creatures which accidentally emerge out of human experimentation with adaptive biomatter. Despite their technological appearance and origins, these creatures evoke an almost eco-horror Anthropocene, in which the anthropogenic harm of the Pathos 2 facility's experimentation with marine life creates a threat to hierarchical human supremacy over non-human life, paralleling a classic Nature Strikes Back eco-horror fable. However, these mutations are seen to both heal as well as harm. The character Simon encounters a kind of technological seaweed at the healing checkpoints in the game in the form of the WOW flowers. The WOW flowers are a swirl of biotechnological tendrils forming the shape of a flower that Simon must place his arm into in order to heal any damage taken. By willfully merging with these non-human flowers, horror is evoked at the transformative merging of human and vegetal. As creeping multi-limbed tendrils, both seaweed and machine, the WOW flowers also evoke the cephalopodic imagery so prevalent in Lovecraftian tales of weird fiction. This generates what Dawn Keatley identifies as a kind of tentacular eco-horror. The Keatley tentacular eco-horror describes the terrifying encounter with a non-human nature that reaches out to entangle the human. While these technological monsters present the future horror of blurred boundaries that come with anthropogenic interference with nature, these tentacular seaweeds remind us that the human has always been subject to creeping non-human entanglements. While violent contact with the WOW generates the horror of SOMA, it is within succumbing to non-human morphology by inserting an arm into the WOW that provides the protagonist Simon relief. While seaweed forms complex environmental embedded storytelling in ABZÜ and SOMA, they take on a more active role in the game In Other Waters. Within In Other Waters, human, technology, and non-human marine life entwine in a more hopeful exploration of human interference with the environment. The game In Other Waters sees you play as the navigational AI of a diving ship, alongside the xenobiologist Dr. Ellery Bass, as she catalogues the various life forms in a thriving alien ocean ecosystem on the edge of explored space, all the while uncovering a sinister mystery of anthropogenic destruction. An important game mechanic is filling in the xenobiologist's taxonomy database by collecting organism samples. These organisms can be placed into the ocean environment to alter it. For example, placing a spore can cause dense vegetation to retract, and algae can be incorporated into the xenobiologist's scuba suit in order to provide oxygen. These primary game mechanics, consisting of interactions with an external environment and taking that environment into yourself, facilitate the major theme of the game, that of symbiosis. In discussing this theme, game designer Gareth Martin of Jump Over the Age states that these interlinkings of human and non-human actors blur boundaries and create something that explores these divisions between human and natural in order to find something more interesting inside. Most notably, the character Mine, Ellery's old girlfriend who goes missing, is found having genetically modified her body with alien organism samples in order to more deeply explore the ocean floor. As she's held in quarantine in a lab, she's described as now more plant than human. Though Mine's entire body is transfigured by becoming seaweed, rendering her unrecognizable as human, Ellery herself takes on the oxygen of algae samples via her scuba suit's AI in order to overcome underwater breathing. Though Mine is recognizably non-human by the end, Ellery's own multi-species co-constitution shows how boundaries of what a human is are temporary and subject to mediation. As an ABZÜ, the game juxtaposes co-constitutive non-human relationships with the existential threat that anthropogenic damage has on our ocean, specifically caused by capitalist corporate technologies. In the game, you must navigate the bloom, a toxic microbial algae that leaves ecological dead zones in its wake. This is later revealed to be a genetically adapted organism by a colonizing corporation named Bikal, who mutated the algae in an attempt to terraform the planet by oxygenating the atmosphere. Instead, this results in massive ecological damage after a terraforming site is breached. The bloom is described as a mysterious phenomenon, similar to terrestrial algae blooms but far more potent. Here the game parallels real-world examples of toxic cyanobacterial blooms, often caused by industrial chemical runoff, in some places stretching up to 650 miles long. While these algae blooms do occur naturally, it is human activity that produces such major examples of marine ecological damage. However, in the game, the toxicity of the bloom is held at bay by the symbiotic gene splicing ability of the alien artificers, bringing the harm of human authority into close proximity to a mode that disrupts such anthropocentric hierarchies. 2. Filter-feeding animals, such as the bloom fans, begin to thrive in these algae bloom zones. The bloom fans filter through the toxic microbial growth like lungs, producing a resulting dust that accelerates oxygen production in algae, creating a symbiotic relationship. The toxicity of human relationships to the planet's oceans, as represented through these algae blooms, is mediated by the more generative multi-species relationships of the artificers and the bloom fans. For in other waters, symbiosis extends beyond philosophical questions of the boundaries between human and non-human nature. Rather, symbiosis is positioned as another way to live and thrive in the Anthropocene. Symbiotic explorations between seaweed and other life forms consider more healthy ways to position ourselves in a relationship to the ocean and amid dangerous climatological damage. In the call for post-human kelp methodology, scholars of the Posthumanities Hub argues that seaweed enable us to think more post-humanly with non-human nature, stating that kelp teaches us to abandon the humanist idea of a bounded individual, as kelp is done and undone in relation to whole ecologies of marine and extramarine life, in relation to water salinity, ocean temperatures, and other ocean creatures. While the breaking of human-non-human boundaries is used to evoke ecological terror in SOMA, it is within In Other Waters and ABZÜ that human kelp hybridities and contact zones become a call for recognizing our responsibility to our planet's oceans. As they bounce back from ecological damage, form kinships with humans and human actors, evade human taxonomic authority, and even transfigure into monsters themselves, seaweeds within these games come to represent the agency of the deeply non-human world that lurks at the bottom of the ocean. And here's my bibliography. And thank you.